Welcome, curious friends. You may not believe it, but beauty once lived in this house. And beauty lives here still. Show yourself. Love me, isn't she?
Our ghost story of today takes us to a very beautiful street in our neighborhood. In fact, it's a street just around the corner from where we live. This street is called Zeedijk, which means sea dike. Before we start our story, please allow me to tell you a little bit about the history of this very old street. The construction of Zeedijk at the beginning of the 13th century meant that Amsterdam, which at that time was called Amsterdam, was no longer subjected to regular flooding. The Zeedijk later became part of a system of dikes that protected the city against the wild waters of the IJ and the Zuiderzee, a shallow but large inlet of the North Sea through which ships reached Amsterdam. The protection and security provided by the dikes helped grow Amsterdam into an important harbor and business city. The Zeedijk is part of Amsterdam's Chinese district. Note that the street signs in this area are in both Dutch and Chinese. The Zeedijk also marks one of the boundaries of the red light districts. It features many authentic buildings, as well as original and restored gables. It is home to one of two remaining wooden houses in Amsterdam. One of which is Zeedijk 1, dating back to 1550. On the Zeedijk you also find bars and pubs, fashion stores, restaurants and eateries, and even a Buddhist temple. In the 17th century, houses in and around the bend in the Zeedijk, roughly from numbers 31 through 44 today, was one of the most prestigious places for rich merchants to live. When they later left for the Herengracht, which is a couple of blocks away, a couple of neighborhoods away, the Zeedijk and surrounding area slowly transformed into a center for nightlife, entertainment and prostitution. During the 1970s and early 80s, the Zeedijk was a center for illegal street trade in drugs. The presence of desperate junks, pickpockets, street robbers, and sundry violent criminals turned the dike, as the street is referred to in the neighborhood, into a no-go area for many people. Many locals moved away while several bars and other businesses closed and later reopened as seedy dungeons that attracted even seedier customers. In 1985, the city, pressured by the neighborhood, took action. In cooperation with several private parties, it set up an organization that bought, restored, and subsequently leased stores, bars, and houses to legitimate merchants. Police regularly swept the Zeedijk and surrounding area clean. To date, the Zeedijk is one of many spots the police keeps an eye on via camera surveillance system. With the downward spiral broken, the Zeedijk again became a popular street. Its many shops, boutiques, tokos, restaurants, and eateries make it a popular destination for tourists and locals alike. The easiest way to find Zeedijk is from Central Station, with your back toward the station's main entrance. You face Damrak, the boulevard that leads to Dam Square, or as many tourists like to call it, the Palace. You should be able to find it on your left from this point while standing with your back to the main entrance of Central Station. From this point, you should be able to see a big Catholic church, and the Zeedijk neighborhood starts right behind this church. Now, please allow me to tell you the story of Helena, the ghost of Amsterdam. Most of us locals may claim not to believe in ghosts, but settle into a corner of one of Amsterdam's ancient pubs on a stormy night, and you might overhear whispered tales of some of the city's most notorious spectres. Feeling brave? One of Amsterdam's most famous ghosts is that of a woman named Helena, a tanner's daughter who lived somewhere on the Zeedijk in the 18th century with her father and sister Dina. Overcome by jealousy, when a handsome sailor fell in love with her sweet sister, Helena was the fairest of the two, and she decided it should have been her that marries that handsome sailor. Helena reportedly threw Dina into the tannery cellar, killing her and making her death appear as a tragic accident. Helena went on to marry the sailor, yet on her deathbed in 1753, she confessed her crime and begged his forgiveness. Her husband refused to forgive her, instead cursing her soul to roam in misery for eternity. Exactly 100 years after her death, Helena's screams were heard on the site of her crime, and many visitors have reported sights of her tortured ghost roaming the dark alley where the tannery once stood, unable to find peace. The mystery that still lives today is, where was the tannery? Where did all of this took place? We need to know. We do not want to run into the angry, tortured soul of Helena. Luckily, we have some clues. First, we know this area was home to many sailors, as we can tell from a neighborhood nearby called Zeeheldenbuurt, translated Sea Heroes Neighborhood. But we need more specific information to pinpoint the tannery. Our first clue is from the Amsterdam City Archives, which tell us that the tannery used to be located on the head of Zeedijk on the left side. But like many streets, Zeedijk has a beginning and an end. So it depends on from which point you start. But luckily, we have a written article from a magazine called Panorama. And In this article, we read that locals tell in their story that the last spot where Dina was kissing her sailor was under a bridge near the Eye. The Eye, formerly a bay, but now a river splitting Amsterdam in two. We know that Eye has been here even before the formal birth date of Amsterdam, as we can see in this painting. As you can see, a lot of ships, and that means a lot of sailors coming into town. Here is another painting of the Eye in the 17th century. So now we at least have a confirmation that some of the info from the old articles are correct, like the Eye. But since the Eye is a huge river, it still hasn't helped us to pinpoint the location of the tannery. So back at where we have started, the Zeedijk. We read the confirmation of the location like is mentioned in the Amsterdam City Archives. So Zeedijk is the place we have to investigate. But where should we start? Let's begin from the clues we have from the Amsterdam City Archives, and let's see where we end up. Again, in this source, we read that the tannery was located at the beginning of Zeedijk. The beginning of Zeedijk seen from the central station. As you see here. Or is it the beginning of Zeedijk seen from the Nieuwe Markt? As you see here. Which end? Because of this, you will find two versions of this story in our neighborhood here in Amsterdam. One version follows the clues from the city archives that eventually lead to an even older source from 1903. A newspaper article by a reporter named Justus van Maurik, who happened to have been born on August 16th, like me. Isn't that funny? I celebrate my birthday just like this guy on the same day. But his birthday is, of course, not in the same year as mine, but in 1846. This Justus claimed to have based his info on an even older source from 1853, which is supposed to locate the tannery on the end of Zeedijk seen from the Nieuwe Markt, as I'm showing you right now. This version is the most popular version here in the neighborhood. But it's not the correct version, as we will find out. Another piece of info I should tell you at this point is that there were rumors that older sources mentioned. These older sources mentioned that the ghost of Helena appears every 100 years on the highest roof on Zeedijk. So when the newspaper Parool published an announcement that in July of 1953 it would have been another 100 years gone by since the death of Helena, everyone gathered around this place, which I'm showing you right now, which is called Café de Waag. Everyone gathered around this pub or cafe, I should say, and waited for Helena to appear on its roof. But eventually, they were all disappointed. As we can read in an article in the newspaper Algemeen Handelsblad, who reported on this event of July 1953. So the Amsterdam City Archives and this justice are not the source we should trust. The reason is mentioned in Panorama magazine, the article from July 1953. In here we read that Justice has allowed himself to make some modification in the original story. Justice told us that we should be looking in the area of Zeedijk on the side of Newmarkt, but the original story says the exact opposite, that we should investigate the Zeedijk area on the side of Central Station. The Panorama article also says that the tannery used to be where later the first Chinese restaurant on Zeedijk would be. This is also not a very helpful clue, since the whole of Zeedijk is covered in Chinese/Asian stores and restaurants today. Still, in this same article from Panorama, we read from July 1953 that the ghost of Helena appeared on a roof of a house in the curve of Zeedijk. But Zeedijk has technically two curves, one inward and one outward. So which one? When we look on the map, we see that curve 1 is more curvy than curve 2. Curve 1 contains the homes 32A till about 51. So far we read in the Panorama article info that lead us somewhere. So we have reasons to keep trusting this Panorama article instead of the city archives and other sources. So let's read further what Panorama has to say. The tannery was located on Zeedijk, so that we know, at the end seen from Central Station. When you enter Zeedijk from this angle, it should be on your left, as I'm showing you right now. On this spot, the article mentions, is where later a cheese and a meat store would be. The only old-looking house I could find was this, as I'm showing you right now. Still known today as the oldest house on Zeedijk. Could this have been the tannery? It certainly looks like it. Is this the tannery where Helena killed her sister Dina and damned herself for eternity? I'm afraid the story does not end here. The Amsterdam City address book does confirm that there has been a cheese and a meat store on Zeedijk, more or less toward this point, but this was not located on the left but on the right side when you enter Zeedijk from the Central Station. The house number was 202, which is now 42. And that, my friends, takes us to this home. Oh, one could almost feel the anger of Helena, trapped in this world. Shivers go up and down your spine when you approach this house. But there is also kindness of Dina, her warm, sweet energy, also still roaming around and protecting the innocents from the evils of her sister. This, my friends, is the true story of the ghost of Amsterdam.